Hello YouTube, this is Froogle and welcome to the first ever Froogle Sim 777 fully loaded series. We're going to be doing a flight today in the PMDG 777-200LR from KJFK in New York out to Denver, which is KDEN. Now, I had a lot of suggestions for the route here. Most of them were long haul. This is actually a short haul route. It's only about a 3.5 hour flight and we're going to be using time acceleration, so don't worry about that. But I didn't do the long haul stuff because there's a lot of new things that I have to grasp to make this video. There's going to be enough chances for me to mess stuff up, really, without messing around with ETOPS and North Atlantic tracks and all that kind of stuff. So we'll keep it fairly simple to minimize the amount of annoyance I cause the experts. Hopefully I don't cause too many experts to get annoyed. Now, this is a fully loaded video. For those of you that are new to Froogle Sim, what fully loaded means is there are usually at least 2 computers powering the sim. So right now there is one computer running Microsoft FSX, obviously with the beautiful PMDG 777 in it. On the other computer, which I'll whiz you over to right now, this other computer is running Active Sky. It's running Ablesoft EFB. See, here's Active Sky down here. It's running the Ablesoft EFB that you can see here. I did my flight planning with PFPX. I have Adobe Reader fired up with the FCOMs. We're going to be working through those and with the flight plan. Now, normally in a fully loaded video, in the first part of a fully loaded video, I will spend an inordinate amount of time on flight planning. I am not going to today because I've already done it. But even if you've seen these before, you need to watch what happens before we get in the cockpit and start flicking switches. There are some tricks and tips for this aircraft that you will probably never have seen anywhere else, and believe me, you're going to find them amazing. So let's remain on this second computer for a little while and let me talk you through everything. So I've already got a flight plan that I planned with PFPX. Here it is. This flight plan I actually grabbed from flightaware.com. It is for Delta Airlines 961 from KFJ to Denver, so it is an accurate flight plan. I've already set it up in here. If you have started using PFPX, and I'm sure I'll be doing lots of videos on this, lots of videos, not just one, coming up, then what you can do is you can load up your flight plan, click on the export button, you'll see this dialog, which you don't normally set up when you set up PFPX. Make sure you have all your directories set, and then all you need to do is go down here and choose PMDG Simulations NGX, and click on Apply. Look at the file name here, KJFK KDEN01. Click on Apply. That has now given us a company route that we can pick up in the 777. Very important. So rather than keying in all the waypoints, you can do your flight planning with PFPX. Just export the whole lot in one go. Let's go over to Active Sky real quick. I've loaded historic weather, which is one of the reasons that I love Active Sky. So I've set the weather to 9 AM. It's actually 44 minutes past now, but 9 AM on August the 1st in KJFK. Excellent. Another reason to love Active Sky though is it gives you winds aloft data, which are very useful for flight planning. Well, it was always pretty useful in the past. Now it is incredibly useful with the 777. I will show you for why. If you go up to flight plan, click on enter plan. We're going to import my flight plan that I previously created. You can export, by the way, a Microsoft format flight plan from PFPX, which I've done here. So I will open that flight plan. I will import it. I will put in my alternate, which is KCOS. We're flying at flight level 400, that's all good. Click on process. Okay, it will give you this. You've all seen this before. This is your winds aloft table. This is what you would normally use in the NGX, and you would laboriously go through this and key all the values in. Not anymore, my friends, not anymore. Scroll down here, this bottom area, until you see a hideously ugly, confusing chart, which is this. What you need to do, put your cursor in here, click and drag that whole table of figures all the way down to the last waypoint here. Click and drag it, press Ctrl C to copy it. Once you've done that, run up Notepad. So here's Notepad, paste it. Simple. Now save it. This is where it gets very interesting. Save it as, change the file type from text to all documents. Find your PMDG directory. If you do not have one, create a WX directory, and in there save this file. So the name of our flight plan that we're going to load in the aircraft is in capital letters, KJFK KDEN01. Okay? Make sure you match the name of the company route that you're going to be loading in the aircraft, and then click on save. Make sure you put .wx on the end. Click on save. You will see why very, very shortly, and believe me, it is awesome. Okay, What else we got up here? We're going to be working through the FCOMs. The aircraft is in a fairly warm state, so a turnaround state. As with all PMDG aircraft, the 777 comes with a number of huge Boeing manuals. FCOM 1 is where you will find the procedures or the flows. You don't need checklists because they're built into the aircraft, and we'll go through those actually in the aircraft, but we are going to run through all these flows. There's a lot of stuff we won't need to do. So, for example, emergency equipment check, and I'm going to show you a shortcut for skipping through a lot of this stuff as well, especially on the pre-flight stuff. But this is where we're going to start. So, back on over to our cockpit. Okay, so we're in the cockpit. Let's go through starting this up and getting this ready to go. Now, it's actually quite easy. There are two sets of flows. I'm just adjusting my microphone. There are two sets of flows in the FCOM. One for the captain, scan flows, and one for the first officer. The captain's one is, as usual, fairly simple. He starts here, so at the oxygen panel, proceeds forward through here, through the panel lights and the heaters, all the way up here, display control, then across here, all the way up to that. So checking EFIS, checking the order flight system on the MCP, checking the displays down here. Once he's done, the captain simply goes down here, so CDU, across to the center console. Now the first officer's flow is a little bit more complex, and because it's more complex, it's a little bit more thorough. Now, since you're flying this on your own, not as captain with a first officer, a real first officer, I find it's actually a good idea to combine the first officer's flows with the captain's flows. So the first officer flow, he starts up on the overhead. You'll notice the overhead is divided into 4 strips. So he starts here and goes down this one, then this second strip, down the third strip, down the fourth strip. Then he comes down to the cockpit itself. He starts on the right hand side, goes across here, his display control, over to here, the ICAS buttons, his EFIS controls here, his screens, his CDU, center console, and then the radios and the center pedestal down here. So combining the two, what I tend to find is the best way of setting this up is actually this. Do the 4 strips at the top. Once you've done that, pretend you're the captain. So start over here, test your oxygen, work your way around here, so the light control, display control, then EFIS, auto flight, ICAS, all the way across, then simply come back and do all the screens across here, then a CDU pre-flight, make sure all your levers and knobs here are where they should be, then radios and everything else, and that tends to work out a better flow. It is still kind of following the FCOM's amplified procedures, but kind of combining first officer and captain. So I want to keep things fairly simple in this. So starting at the top here, we're going to turn on the Adaroos, and then we're going to work down and make sure guards are closed and all these switches are where they need to be. So guards are closed here. Our electrical switches are all on. We have external power, which is connected. We have secondary external power as well available. We might as well turn that on. We're not going to turn on the APU just yet. Notice that the generator switches are on, but the indicator lights are showing us off. This is a fairly smart aircraft. It will auto-configure itself if switches are in the right state. So these generators are off, but by having them switched on when we power up the engines, then the generators are all going to be taken care of. Next strip here, ground procs runway override, that is closed. Passenger oxygen guards are closed. Emergency lights, we need to arm them. We do that by closing the guard. Window heats all on. Hydraulics obviously are all off because nothing's running. Our no smoking and seatbelt signs, we need to turn those all on at this point. Down to our light control. Well, we're going to center all of these. It's just a good idea to have these centered. Previous crew was a little bit lazy and didn't center them. Don't really know why. Moving across here now, cargo fire switches are off. All the guards are closed as you would expect. Auto start needs to be on, ready for us to start the engines. Fuel jettison, obviously that can stay off. Fuel pumps can stay off for now. Wing anti-ice and engine anti-ice all stay off. We need to turn our nav lights on. Onto the 4th strip now. Equipment calling, we have that on auto. We do have equipment powered up and running, so we leave equipment calling auto. We will now turn on the gasper and the recirc fans to get some air through the cabin. Everything else down here is on auto or on. Notice we have the off lights just the same as over here on the main generators. They are off, but the switches are in the auto or on state. Same down here for packs, and bleed air is all automatic. Pressurization is all automatic. So the overhead panel is in a good state. So let's move down as we said, and we'll work on the captain's flow and then kind of marry it to the first officer. So oxygen, that seems to be working. Let's get rid of this yoke, it's a little bit hard to see. Make sure that these lights are centered here. going to make life a little bit easier given the early morning sun. These switches, display control switches, so for nav, display control and air data, they are all off, which is where they need to be. Moving across here, our minimums, I prefer to fly with radio for minimums, so we're going to turn that to radio. We could set the barometric pressure at this point. Let me just go and check what that is on the other computer again. So currently 29 at 9 at 8. So as I explained in a previous video, this switch does not work how it did in the NGX, which was actually incorrect the way it worked in the NGX. This is not a knob that you spin and spin and spin. It's a knob that you hold, turn and hold. So to go up to 29 at 9 at 8, we would turn this to the right and hold it. There we go, 29 at 9 at 8. Going to bring me range down on the navigation display here. Moving across, we're not going to arm the flight director. Well, we are going to make sure all these buttons are in an off state right now. So autopilot is off, auto throttle is armed but off, LNAV, VNAV are off, flight level change is off, heading hold is off, and so on and so on. So let's float across now to the first officer's side. Here's our displays. We might as well bring up a display down here. We're going to be needing a checklist shortly. We'll come down to configuring that in a second. Again, radio is what I prefer. Many people prefer barometric. I prefer radio, especially given where we're going today. Denver is 5,500 feet up above sea level. So that's all good there. Let's check his oxygen. We are all good. Let's center his lighting knobs here. Get a bit more light into this cockpit. Good. These buttons are all off. 29 at 9 at 8. We are all good there. Moving on down to his displays then. So navigation display is fine for now. These guards are all closed as they should be. Auto brake's going to be RTO. What else have we got? Adaru is in align mode. That just came up good. So now we can start working through the CDU and setting in our flight plan. So going through the CDU pre-flight works in a very similar fashion to the NGX. First thing we're going to need to do though is go to FS Actions and make sure we have the fuel we need on board. So we'll click on fuel. The fuel, according to my flight plan, is 58,379 pounds of fuel, which is less than short range. This is a 3.5 hour flight, but for this aircraft it's a short range flight. Go to our payload. Now I've actually planned on having roughly 200 people on board. That's not 200. It's actually a little bit tricky to set the right numbers in here, but we'll go for it. So let's put 14 up here in first class. We'll put 48 in business. Like so. Let's go ahead and put 130 in economy. That works out pretty good. Okay, so with everything loaded up there, now we can go to the FMC and start working through our CDU pre-flight. So positioning it, as with the NGX, it wants you to set the inertial position. So next page, pull the value out of the GPS. Previous page, click the LSK to set it. Our reference airport is KJFK. That's where we're currently at. Not sure which gate we're at, so I'm going to leave that blank. It doesn't really matter. Now we go onto the route page. In fact, let me just check the other pages here. Good. So now we can go to the route page. Okay, now you remember that from PFPX, we exported our flight plan into PMDG format, which means we can load that as a company route here. So the name of the file that we exported from PFPX is KJFK to KDEN01. Put that into the company route. Let's put in our flight number, which is Delta 961, DAL 961 here. The runway that we're taking is runway 31 left. And activate. Now if we go to the legs page, you'll see there's the route that we had planned out from PFPX. Now here's the cool bit. Because we also exported the weather from Active Sky, normally in the NGX you will click on route data now and start setting in wind values at each waypoint based on the expected altitude at each waypoint. We don't need to do that. We just click on wind data request, execute. How cool is that? Isn't that great? There's all our waypoints with our wind speeds and directions. So that's a wonderful little trick. Go back to init ref now. We'll start setting up performance in it. Just like the NGX again, left click, twice on zero fuel weight. That was set in the gross weight and the zero fuel weight. According to our flight plan, our fuel reserves today are 6.2. Now our cruise altitude, well, we'll set up the cost index first, which is 85. Now our cruise altitude is actually planned to be 400. Notice we've got a max alt here of 397. So we'll actually go underneath this then. 380. Good. We can do a step climb. We're not going to in this video. I'm going to keep things very simple in this series of videos. There are other videos coming where we'll look at step climbs and other things I'm going to talk you through in a little while. So step size, let's put in a step size of 0. We are not doing a step climb. Let's go to the thrust limits. Going to use a standard derated takeoff 1, climb 1. And then takeoff is going to be flaps 5. Center of gravity will just come up automatically as soon as you click there. We have our V-speeds here. We're not going to take them just yet because we haven't actually planned the departure. So let's go back over to the EFB very quickly. We are expecting runway 31 left. We are currently here. 31 left is here. We need to look at our departure. The problem with JFK is that it is in the middle of a bunch of other airports. So LaGuardia up here, Newark down here. It's a very busy airspace. So let me turn some of this confusing symbology off. If you actually look at the SID overview, departing to the west, most of the SIDs will take you straight up to the north and then west, which is way out of our way. The only one that works for us is actually this one, JFK1. Now it's saying vectors. It actually isn't vectors if you choose the right runway, which in our case is 31 left. So let's go ahead and do that. Runway 31 left, there. We're going to use JFK1. Notice it's not saying vectors now, it's putting us at waypoint CRI, which is pretty much exactly where we want to be. Activate that. That's what our departure looks like. So taking off from runway 31 left, turn left to Canarsie, which is CRI, and then follow en route. Perfect. So back into the cockpit. Click on departure arrival. There's JFK1. We'll choose that. Let's scroll down and choose runway 31 left. It's already selected because we put that into position init. Execute. We have our departure set up now, so we can go back to init ref and we can set in these V speeds for takeoff. So V2 is 149. Now we can provide a bit more information to help here. We know that we have a crosswind takeoff. So if we click on next page here, there's the wind on the runway here. So we have a wind from 180 at 13 knots. So 180/13. That will automatically calculate the wind component on the runway, and notice it's deleted our takeoff speeds, which is correct. So if we go back to the previous page now, it's recalculated our takeoff speeds. They're actually the same, so we can just re-accept those. Good. Perfect. Now let's go on over to the ICAS displays. Having done our CDU pre-flight, let's go on over to the ICAS displays here. Make sure that checklist is selected, which it is. You can see it down here. We will reset, wrong view Froogle, we will reset all of our checklists and click on normal. So the first checklist is pre-flight checklist. So pre-flight checklist, oxygen tested 100%. Flight instruments, we've not done that. We need to make sure that we're all set there. So altimeter is 299 at 8. We are currently facing a heading of 074, which is correct. So flight instruments are all checked and we're good there. Parking brake is set. Fuel control switches are in cutoff. Pre-flight checklist complete. So now ICAS is onto the before start checklist. We haven't actually finished our flows yet though, so let's continue working around the cockpit here. Radios. We're not going to be using ATC, so we don't actually need the radios, but let me talk about this panel right here. This will show you, the light shows you what you're monitoring, the mic light shows you what you're speaking on. So if you're flying on VATSIM, you want to have the mic light on the radio that you are tuned to VATSIM on, otherwise they can't hear you. It is a good idea to also monitor COM2. So this is how you would set up the captain's radios to talk on COM1, monitor COM1, and also monitor COM2. Similarly, if you had a first officer, he might want to monitor COM1 and have his mic on COM2. Simple as that. I'm going to set in a squawk code here, just 2200. Again, we're not flying with ATC. The idea of this video is to keep it fairly simple as a first flight. So we're going to put this is already on standby, so don't need to worry about that. If you wanted to at this point, you could do a TCAS test, which means up here you start getting the usual TCAS test symbology that you're familiar with from the NGX. Moving on back, make sure all our guards are closed.
Test, pass.
Over here on the alternate flaps, make sure that the guard is closed there and that they are off. Everything is looking good. Last thing that we might want to do is actually set up our hydraulic trim to 2.58. We can't actually do that because hydraulics are not currently powered up. But while we're down here, make sure that our stabilizer cutouts, guards are closed there as well. Now we can start working through our before start flows. Now we can finish setting up the MCP because we have our CDU initialized. So V2 is 149. Our initial heading on runway 31 left is 314. And typically if we did have air traffic control, they would clear us up to an altitude of around 5,000. So we'll put that in like so. Finally, arm the flight directors. And you can verify that you have all the correct data now to navigate vertically and laterally by arming LNAV and VNAV. If the lights come on, you're good to go, which we are. So now we can start working through the pre-start flows. So back up again to the overhead and we'll start doing the first officer flows again, scan flows again. So working down here, everything is good here. We already set that up. We are going to come off external power soon, so the APU now can go on. These switches are all good. The lights are all as expected. This is all fine. Nothing has changed here. We do need to start powering up the hydraulics. Now let me skip to the before start flows in the FCOM. There is a sequence that you really should follow. It doesn't really matter if you do this out of sequence, but I like to actually follow the FCOMs. So you always pressurize the right hand system first to prevent fluid transfer between the different systems. So the way we do that is, you'll notice the hydraulic panel is split into two parts, primary and demand. So the right electric demand pump selector, this one, needs to go to auto. Wait for the fault light to go out. There it goes. Center 1 and Center 2 electric primary pump switches need to go on. Remember, primary, Center 1, Center 2, these need to go on. Then we verify that the Center 1 fault light is extinguished. There it goes. The Center 2 fault light will often stay illuminated until after engine start because of load shedding. Now we go to the left electric demand pump selector. Here we go, left electric demand pump selector. Put that to auto and again wait for the fault light to go out. Like so, and then finally you can turn on Center 1 and Center 2 air demand pump selectors to auto and wait for their fault lights to go out, which they did straight away, and then we can turn on the primary pumps. Done. Alright, working on down here. These switches are unchanged. These light control switches are all unchanged. Back up to the top. These switches are all unchanged. Auto start is on, ready for us to start the engine. We should set up the fuel pumps right now. We have no fuel in the center tanks. You can verify that by looking at the ICAS displays here. There's fuel quantity left, right, and 0 in the center. I actually pressed the wrong button. Let's try that again. So we leave these center pumps off and we will go forward pumps on the left, aft pumps on the left on, forward pumps on the right, aft pumps on the right on. We're not obviously engaging crossfeed at this point, so we're good. Turn on the beacon. All good there. Now up here, make sure that these are all on and auto. Which they are, which they are, which they are, which they are, which they are. And our flow on the overhead is complete, ready to start the engines. Let's go down here. The checklist that we have selected is after start, so there's nothing else to do down here other than at this point now to contact ground and ask for pushback. So let's go ahead and do that. Pushback system works just as it did in the NGX. So menu, FS actions, pushback. We're going to turn our nose to the right. We're going to turn our nose to the right 90 degrees. You do need to guess the total distance to travel. Oh, we need to remove the wheel chocks as well. Haha. Notice how it's helping us out here. It's actually put a yellow line up here saying remove the wheel chocks. So let's go into ground connections. Before you do that, make sure the APU is running. So the APU is running. You can see the display over here on ICAS. On the center display, sorry. APU is running. Good. So back down here, we'll remove the wheel chock, so that will also automatically disconnect ground power. So we're running on the APU right now. So now we can go pushback. That yellow warning has gone away. We can say start.
And ground, cockpit.
Go ahead, Captain.
We're all set to go up here. We've been cleared to push and start at your discretion.
Roger that, ready for push. Power and air clear, doors closed. We are ready for pushback. Release parking brake, please.
Okay, so we're going to release the parking brake. Incidentally, the guy on the ground talking to us is actually Robert Rendazzo.
Okay, parking brake is off. Cleared to push.
Brakes off, here we go.
Alright, so we're starting our push. So now we're going to start the engines. Our start sequence is 2, then 1. So to start the engine, number 2, right-hand engine, flick it to start. You can see N1 is starting to rotate now, so fuel cutoff goes to run. Now you're listening for the click, which is the starter cutout. At that point, we're just monitoring to make sure the engine stabilizes, and then we can start engine number 1. Okay, engine number 1.
Push is complete. Set parking brake, please.
Alright, brakes are set and pressure's normal.
Now I actually screwed up there. I've done everything a little bit out of sequence. I should have done my before start checklist first. Let's just run through the checklist here while it's doing this. So,
we will be watching for the pin and
flight deck door closed and locked. MCP, we've already set that up. You saw us do it. Takeoff speeds, V1 131, VR 138, V2 149 done. CDU pre-flight is done. Trim should be 2.5. We will do that in 1 second. And our taxi and takeoff briefing we will say is done. Clicking on normal will take us to the next checklist. 2.5 on the trim. Now hydraulics are powered, we can do that. Sorry about that error. Okay, you heard the starter cutout click. Waiting for the engine to stabilize now. Jumped a little bit, but there we go. It's stabilizing. So we're good to go. So let's go ahead and turn the APU off now. Now the APU, you turn the selector off, you leave the generator on. It will go into its cool down phase. You'll see an indication up here that it's in cool down. Good. Now assuming we've got permission to taxi, we can go ahead and set up the lights ready for taxiing. So taxi light on, strobe stay off. You can turn off on the you can turn on the runway turn off lights if you wish. That's hard to say. Turn on the runway turn off lights. I'm going to turn them on. Now I've got a feature called ground splash enabled. Ground splash is a feature that you enable outside of the sim, which makes the lights affect the ground during the daylight. A lot of people don't like it. They say it's unrealistic. I actually like it, so that's why you'll see some lighting here from the lights on the aircraft during the daylight. I just like it. So APU is on cooldown. Let us run the before taxi checklist. So anti-ice is all off. Recall, it says next. We haven't checked recall. Recall is over here. Small button on the right. We'll click that. Good. TCAS is off. Okay, so we're going to turn on the transponder now. We'll go all the way up. Normally you do that a little bit later. It doesn't really matter. TCAS is now on. So anti-ice is checked, recall is checked. Flight controls. Now flight controls. You test the flight controls. It's a fly-by-wire aircraft. You need to make sure that all the flight controls are responding to what you want them to do. What we will do is go up here to the ICAS control buttons, select the left inboard display, which is this one. We will put that now into flight control. There's our flight controls, and then steadily and progressively move the controls through all the extents. So full forward, full back, full left, full right, now rudder, full left, full right, and neutral. So flight controls are good. Don't forget to set that back to a navigation display. Make sure left inboard is selected, choose nav, and then reselect lower center. So flight controls are checked, ground equipment is clear, before taxi checklist complete, and that's the end of this video. In the second part of this fully loaded series, hopefully I'm not going to get things done out of sequence again. We're going to taxi to the runway and do the takeoff. Now the takeoff is going to be very interesting. Now in part 2 we're going to look at the takeoff obviously and how to manage it. This is a very powerful aircraft, and lightly loaded like this, it poses some challenges on the takeoff, but we'll cover that in part 2. As always, my name is Froogle. Thank you for watching. See you next time.